reminds me of like dinner theater. You get to dine and watch a show. That's kind of a wonderful, neat thing. These are 6th graders from Pocahontas Area School, and they're going to perform for you a Reader's Theater called the Christmas Truce. And this Reader's Theater is based on a true story from the time of World War I, 1914. And during World War I, the Germans and the British were on the front lines of northern France fighting. And on Christmas Eve, they called a truce. And for a very short, brief moment, they decided that they would share peace with their enemies. This lasted for only a short time, but while they shared peace with their enemies, they exchanged souvenirs, and they discovered that the opposite side, their enemies that they were fighting, were people just like themselves. But sadly, that time had to come to an end, and they went back to fighting. This Reader's Theater is actually based on diaries and journals written by soldiers of the time. There's 4 soldiers represented here today. One group is Soldier 1, another group is Soldier 2, we have another group as Soldier 3, and another group as Soldier 4. The kids have been working very hard on this. I don't think you'll have any trouble hearing them. They have done a really good job, and without further ado, I am going to let Soldier 1 begin.
Christmas Day, 1914. Dear Mother, my darling Meg, my good friend Charles, my dear sister Janet. It is 2 in the morning, and most of our men are asleep in their dugouts. Yet I could not sleep myself before writing to you of the wonderful events of Christmas Eve. In truth, what happened seems almost like a fairy tale, and if I hadn't been through it myself, I would scarce believe it. Just imagine, while you and the family sang carols before the fire there in London, I did the same with enemy soldiers here on the battlefields of France. As I wrote before, there has been little serious fighting of late. The first battles left so many dead that both sides have held back until replacements could come from home. So we have mostly stayed in our trenches and waited. But what a terrible waiting it has been, knowing that any moment an artillery shell might land and explode beside us in the trench, killing or maiming several men, and in daylight not daring to lift our heads above ground for fear of sniper's bullet. And the rain. It has fallen almost daily. Of course, it collects right in our trenches, where we must bail it out with pots and pans. And with the rain has come mud, a good foot or more deep. It splatters and cakes everything, and constantly sucks at our boots. One new recruit got his feet stuck in it, and then his hands too when he tried to get out. Just like an American story of the tar baby. Through all this, we couldn't help feeling curious about the German soldiers across the way. After all, they faced the same dangers we did and slogged about in the same muck. What's more, their first trench was only 50 yards away from us. Between us lay no man's land, bordered on both sides by barbed wire. Yet they were close enough we sometimes heard their voices. Of course, we hated them whenever they killed our friends, but other times we joked about them and almost felt we had something in common. And now it seems they felt the same. Just yesterday morning, Christmas Eve day, we had our first good freeze. Cold as we were, we welcomed it, because at least the mud froze solid. Everything was tinged white with frost, while a bright sun shone over all. Perfect Christmas weather. During the day, there was rifle fire from either side. And as darkness fell on our Christmas Eve, the shooting stopped entirely.
Our first complete silence in months. We hoped it might promise a peaceful holiday, but we didn't count on it. We've been told the Germans might attack and try to catch us off guard.
I went to my dugout to rest, and lying on my cot, I must have drifted asleep. All at once, my friend was shaking me awake, saying, "Come and see what the Germans are doing." I grabbed my rifle, stumbled out into the trench, and stuck my head cautiously above the sandbags.
I never hoped to see a stranger and more lovely sight. Clusters of tiny lights were shining all along the German line, left and right as far as the eye could see.
"What is it?" I asked in bewilderment, and someone answered, "Christmas trees!"
And so it was. The Germans had placed Christmas trees in front of their trenches, lit by candle and lantern like beacons of goodwill.
And then we heard their voices raised in song. "Stille Nacht, heilige Nacht."
This carol may not yet be familiar to us in Britain, but one soldier knew it and translated. Silent night, holy night. I've never heard one lovelier or more meaningful than that quiet, clear night. Its dark softened by a first quarter moon.
When the song finished, the men in our trenches applauded. Yes, British soldiers applauding Germans.
Then one of our own men started singing, and we all joined in. The first Noel, the angel did say.
In truth, we sounded not nearly as good as the Germans with their fine harmonies, but they responded with an enthusiastic applause of their own and began another. "O Tannenbaum, O Tannenbaum."
Then we replied, "Oh come, all ye faithful."
But this time, they joined in, singing the words in Latin. "Adeste fidelis."
British and German harmonizing across no man's land. I would have thought nothing could be more amazing, but what came next was more so.
"English, come over!" we heard one of them shout. "You know shoot, we know shoot."
There in the trenches we looked at each other in bewilderment. Then one of us shouted jokingly, "You come over here!"
To our astonishment, we saw two figures rise from the trench, climb over the barbed wire, and advance unprotected across no man's land.
One of them called, "Send officer to talk."
I saw one of our men lift his rifle to the ready, and no doubt others did the same. But our captain called out, "Hold your fire!" and went over and hung out in Germans halfway.
We heard them talking a few minutes later. The captain came back with a German cigar in his mouth. "We've agreed there will be no shooting before midnight tomorrow," he announced. "The sentries are to remain on duty, and the rest of you stay alert."
Across the way, we could make out groups of 2 or 3 men starting out of trenches and coming toward us.
Then some of us were climbing out too, and in minutes more, there we were in no man's land, over 100 soldiers and officers of each side, shaking hands with men we've been trying to kill just hours earlier.
Before long, a bonfire was built, and around it we mingled, British khaki and German gray. I must say, the Germans were better dressed, with fresh uniforms for the holiday.
Only a couple of our men knew German, but more of the Germans knew English. I asked one of them why that was. "Because many have worked in England," he said. "Before all this, I was a waiter at the Hotel Cecile. Perhaps I waited on your table." "Perhaps you did," I said, laughing.
One German told me he had a girlfriend in London, and that the war had interrupted their plans for marriage. girl. He laughed at that. Then he asked if I'd send her a postcard he'd give me later, and I promised I would. Another German had been a porter at Victoria Station. He showed me a picture of his family back in Munich. His eldest sister was so lovely, I told him I should like to meet her someday. He beamed and said he would like that very much and gave me his family's address. Even those who could not converse could still exchange gifts. Our cigarettes for their cigars, our tea for their coffee, our corned beef for their sausage. Badges and buttons from uniforms changed owners, and one of our lads walked off with the infamous Mike helmet. I myself traded a jackknife for a leather equipment belt, a fine souvenir to show when I get home. Newspapers too changed hands, and the Germans howled with laughter at ours. They assured us that France was finished and Russia nearly beaten too. We told them that was nonsense, and one of them said, "Well, you believe your newspapers and we'll believe ours." Clearly, they are lied to. Yet after meeting these men, I wonder how truthful our own newspapers have been. These are not the savage barbarians we've read so much about. They are men with homes and families, hopes and fears, principles, and yes, love of country. In other words, men like ourselves. Why are we led to believe otherwise? As they grew late, a few more songs were traded around the fire, and then all joined in for "I'm Not Lying to You," Auld Lang Syne. Then we parted with promises to meet again tomorrow, and even some talk of a football match. I was just starting back to the trenches when an older German clutched my arm. "My gosh," he said, "why cannot we have peace and all go home?" I told him gently, "That you must ask your emperor." He looked at me then searchingly. "Perhaps, my friend, but also we must ask our hearts." And so, dear mother, dear wife, dear friend, dear sister, tell me, has there ever been such a Christmas Eve in all history? And what does it all mean? Is it possible befriending of enemies? For the fighting here, of course, it means regrettably little. Decent fellows those soldiers may be, but they follow orders and we do the same. Besides, we are here to stop their army and send it home, and never could we shirk that duty. Still, one cannot help imagine what would happen if the spirit shown here were caught by the nations of the world. Of course, disputes must always arise. But what if our leaders were to offer well wishes in place of warnings? Songs in place of slurs? Presents in place of reprisals? Would not all war end at once? All nations say they want peace. Yet, on this Christmas morning, I wonder if we want it quite enough. Yours truly, yours always, sincerely, with all my love, John, Andrew, Philip, Tom.
And that concludes our Reader's Theater. I would like for the students to hand their scripts down to Aden, to Savannah.